I call this hearing of the U.S. Senate Subcommittee on Food and Nutrition and Specialty Crops, Organics, and Research to order. We need a farm bill that works for all of our farmers. That includes small farmers and, critically, farmers who grow crops like hemp, fruits, tree nuts, and vegetables. That's why we're holding this hearing today. The Farm Bill safety net programs have been vital for some producers, but we consider this Farm Bill must expand the support for specialty crops. This is an opportunity to decrease risk for our farmers, stabilize our food and supply chains, increase accessibility and healthy fruits and vegetables, and support an important sector of this agriculture industry. And supporting specialty crop producers is crucial for my state with a robust specialty crop industry. In particular, Pennsylvania is known for its booming mushroom industry. In fact, known as the mushroom of the world. More than 60% of mushrooms produced in the United States is known right in Kennett Square in Pennsylvania. Woohoo! So much mushroom farms are significant regional economic drivers. According to the Penn State Extension, the industry employs nearly 9,500 people in the region and contributes estimated $2.7 billion to our local economy. But currently, mushroom producers are not covered under crops insurance. This exclusion could harm mushroom producers and the broader local economy. And that's not just mushroom problem, it's also just about Pennsylvania problem. A specialty crop of drivers of local economies across the country. The bottom line is that we can strengthen local economies supporting down these small farms. My colleagues and I have already seen working ahead to support small farmers. I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of Senator Brown's Local Farms and Food Act of 23. This bill will invest farmers by making it easier for them to grow their businesses, sell directly to their communities. This is necessary an investment in rural communities that will increase access to nutritious, locally grown food. It will cut red tape and make it easier for farmers to bring their products to market. I'm also excited to announce my partnership Protecting Mushroom Farmers Act. This will be directed USDA to study crop insurance for mushroom productions to help these farmers. And finally, I look forward to closely to my colleague, Senator Braun, to support farms impacted by the horticulture title. And I am now pleased to turn this over to Senator Braun.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's interesting here because we're talking about a small part of the Farm Bill, and the Farm Bill is at a record level in terms of spending. I am concerned about that larger picture of where we're at as a government in terms of how we're borrowing so much money just routinely year after year. So many things that we need to do well here. This would be an example of it. So this is a small percentage of the Farm Bill, but as the chairman has talked about, this is that leading edge of where you're coming up with new ideas for agriculture. You're also addressing sustainability. We've got panelists here today that'll help us out with that discussion. Indiana is a state that it's the second biggest industry. We're the largest industry or state in the country on manufacturing per capita. Agriculture is right there behind it. So we're known for a lot of specialty crops, including tomatoes for processing, spearmint, peppermint, watermelons. I was, back many years ago, started a turkey brooding and raising business that was right when they were coming from the range into confinement. So that is how important agriculture is to our state. Just like with many things, you got to be careful that you keep it entrepreneurial, you keep it a good business environment. And a lot of times with any legislation comes regulation that sometimes works at cross purposes. So I want to make sure that we're aware of that. Couple bills out there that we're sponsoring. The Plant Biostimulant Act. They've taken off in foreign markets. They're less known in the U.S. My bill would build on the USDA report from 18 by codifying a definition of plant biostimulant and ensuring that these products have a clear pathway to market. Something new. We want to make sure it's got the proper amount of regulation. We don't want to stifle it along the way. Industrial Hemp Act. That is from the time I've spent here, a big industry across at least 18 to 20 other countries, mostly for the fiber, not the oil or the seed stock in producing it. So we need to get at that forefront so we are a competitor in the world arena there. I've got a bill that is, along with Senator Tester, I think at the forefront, putting that proper mix of good context for the industry. Again, don't overregulate it. American Food for American Schools Act, another bill out there. I think from this committee, I'm glad the chairman is putting emphasis on small entities within agriculture, the things that are going to turn it around into being an industry maybe different from what it is today. This discussion right here today is where it starts. I'm glad to be a part of it and looking forward to hearing from our witnesses.
Thank you, Senator. And I'm excited to hear from the expert witnesses joining us today and who will introduce themselves shortly. We have Mr. Chris Alonso, the president and owner of Pietro Industries, Inc., and a third-generation mushroom farmer in Kennett Square. Mr. Charles Wingard, the vice president of field operations and the Walter Rawle and Sons, Inc., based in Pelion, South Carolina. Ms. Diana Kobus, the executive director for PCO Certified Organic. And now I turn this back over to my colleague, Senator Braun.
I have the pleasure of introducing Mr. Nick Carter from Indiana, a true entrepreneur. Really, when we met earlier, so many parallels when I got started as an entrepreneur many, many years ago. You're doing it in an area I think that is so important. You're a farmer, entrepreneur, a co-founder of Market Wagon, an online marketplace that connects food consumers directly with local farmers and artisans. Nick has co-founded or founded over a half dozen companies in technology and food sectors, currently operates his own family farm called Mud Creek Farm, and is an active investor and advocate for food and agricultural businesses. And from the day he got out of high school, he's been an entrepreneur and involved in an amazing track record. Active member of the Indiana Farm Bureau and serves on the organization's Diversified Agriculture Policy Advisory Group. He's passionate about using innovation to reconnect agri and culture. He's also the author of More Than a Mile, What America Needs from Local Food. Look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Malonzo, we will now start with you opening our statements. You are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Senator Fetterman and Braun and members of the subcommittee, thank you for having me here today. My name's Chris Alonso, and as you heard, I'm a third-generation mushroom farmer from Kennett Square, Pennsylvania, and I've been growing mushrooms my whole life. Saw it with my father and followed in his footsteps. So while production in California, Oklahoma, Texas, Tennessee, and other states are strong with mushrooms, Pennsylvania produces 2/3 of all the mushrooms in the country. And with this, we do it 365 days a year with agriculture. We employ over 10,000 people. in mushrooms. However, we know that for every ag job, there's 5 non-ag jobs. So really, it's over 50,000 people, and that's what contributes to the economy in Pennsylvania and to the country. So our farm, Pietro Industries, Pietro means Peter in Italian, my grandfather's name, was founded in 1938. My grandfather was a founding member of the American Mushroom Institute, and in addition, so I'm representing AMI today, and in addition, I was on the board of the USDA-based Mushroom Council. So I come to today humbly with a lot of experience talking about mushrooms, which I love. So mushrooms are uniquely nutritious, fresh, functional food. It's a great source of protein and disease-fighting properties. Researchers have identified cancer-inhibiting compounds in the grocery store mushroom. So they found that just adding a little bit of mushrooms into your diet helps increase the intake of these micronutrients like vitamin D. So mushrooms also have a great taste, great umami flavor, and they're healthy, they're hearty, they're filling. So whether you're a vegetarian or a meat eater, they either make the main plate of the meal or they're a great addition to your meal. So my son actually loves to go in, pick them off the beds, eat them straight whenever I give tours, and ask the other people on the tour to eat them fresh. So not everybody does, but so mushrooms are also uniquely sustainable. They reuse water. They grow on a small footprint. Just 1 acre of land can grow 1 million pounds of mushrooms a year. And that's this controlled environment that we can have within mushrooms. But that's also what makes us different and unique than some other crops, why we're here, why we're specialty crops. Mushrooms, the mushroom compost, the food for the mushroom, is formulated using 30 different ag byproducts, corn stover, hay, straw, poultry litter. So we take all these byproducts from other farmers and make it into our beneficial uses. We grow mushrooms, and we also have the byproduct, which is a great soil at the end. So it's the food we eat, and this soil at the end, and taking these byproducts from other farmers helps keep the watershed healthy with less runoff. So mushroom growers therefore not only produce mushrooms, but a reusable value-add soil amendment that sequesters carbon and regenerates soil. All of these nutrition and mushroom compost discoveries have come from investment in research. Yet the mushroom industry lacks critical resources required to stay competitive when it comes to operations. In an increasingly fast-paced agricultural sector, mushrooms need a few things. We need research on integrated pest management to mitigate mushroom-specific pests and pathogens. We need research on the beneficial uses of mushroom compost, which is not a fertilizer but actually sequesters carbon and regenerates our soil. We need research on harvesting mechanization for increased yield, quality, and employee retention. We also need research on the potential value to the industry of crop insurance. These mushrooms are too perishable to import or export overseas. Fresh mushrooms are actually a national commodity that should be treasured. But we need your help. Mushroom farmers are truly feeding America, and your support of research through the Farm Bill will strengthen this agricultural legacy for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I acknowledge my colleague, Senator Boozman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Braun, for holding this hearing today and the great job that you've been doing with this committee. This is such an important subject. I want to take a second to introduce Dr. Worthington. It's very much my pleasure to introduce her this morning. She's joining us from my home state of Arkansas. We are very, very proud of her and her work. Dr. Worthington is an associate professor for horticulture at the University of Arkansas. She holds a PhD in crop science from North Carolina State University and a master's of science in horticulture and agronomy and international agriculture development from the University of California, Davis. Earlier this year, Dr. Worthington was part of a team of 26 scientists from across the world that assembled the first complete sequence of the blackberry genome. This achievement will be a great help to fruit breeders striving to develop improved varieties that are more resistant to disease and tolerant of drought, as well as have greater nutrition and better taste. Dr. Worthington's cutting-edge work is a testament to the importance of modern breeding tools to our specialty crop sector in particular. We are grateful for the expertise she will share with us today. And I'm also grateful she brought us a sample of some of the work that she was doing, freshly picked as she came up yesterday. And so again, thank you very much for being here. Thank all of the panel. And I love mushrooms, so I was glad to hear the mushrooms. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, and Mr. Cardner, we are now recognizing you for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Fetterman, Ranking Member Braun, and members of the subcommittee. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Nick Carter. I testify in front of you today as the owner of Mud Creek Farm. I'm a farmer, co-founder of Market Wagon, and also as a member of Indiana Farm Bureau. Mud Creek Farm is, by all measures, a small farm. On just 20 acres, we have 400 laying hens. We'll finish about 20 head of lamb a year. And we do grow a couple of acres of specialty crops. That includes about an 800 square foot greenhouse. Like I said, by all measures, very small. All of our sales are direct to consumer. The majority of it is through an on-farm retail stand, and the rest goes through Market Wagon. So while our farm is small, when 1,500 or more other small farms just like us come together in a marketplace like Market Wagon, then the real scope and impact of small farming comes into focus. Market Wagon's a marketplace that's comprised of small, diversified farms and food purveyors just like ours. In 15 states, we've delivered nearly 1 million orders to over 70,000 customers and making real impact for small family farms all across the Midwest and South. I'm proud of that work. The challenges that Mud Creek Farm and other farms like us face are many, but there's a few I wanted to highlight today. One is matching supply with demand. So if we have extra crop as a small farmer, it's not at the scale that any institutional buyer could look at. So any supply glut is really ours to deal with. That means that we have to match the supply to the demand. We have to find a consumer for the crop as it's ready. To mitigate that risk, we diversify, okay? What we're growing and when we grow it. Season extenders, high tunnels, things of that nature. We need also every possible market opportunity so that we can market the crop when it's available. The second one to highlight is just management of capital. When you diversify the farm like we have, and when I say that, we do both crops and livestock. And that's a key integration of those two things in a biome there. There become innumerable small implements like transplanters, mulch layers, manure spreaders, that each one of them could create tremendous efficiencies. The challenge is knowing where to deploy that capital and how to prevent over-leveraging so that one bad year doesn't make the farm insolvent. Through Indiana Farm Bureau, I've had the opportunity to advocate for specialty crop producers at the state level. A policy action group that I served on helped to craft policy that lowered the regulatory hurdles for small farms to sell their products to local consumers. Ultimately, that policy turned into a bill, and that bill was signed by Governor Eric Holcomb last year, and we are already seeing impact in our state, and I'm proud of that work. However, resources for specialty crop growers cannot just be at the State House. The Farm Bill is a perfect opportunity to show support for these producers. Senators Roger Marshall and Peter Welch recently introduced a bill that would allow new ways for small producers to sell products across state lines. The DIRECT Act. It's an important, long overdue modernization of the FSIS code that gives diversified farms, just like ours, the increased access to sell direct to consumers, which is very, very important to us. I would strongly encourage you to advance that bill this year. Programs such as the LFPP and Farm to School are great, but these grant programs need to become less onerous to apply for and manage in order for them to be accessible to small farmers. Schools are the largest institutions that are embedded in the very communities where diversified farms exist and have federal buying power. In Indiana, we passed legislation that would allow schools to buy from local FFA chapters. Congress should consider ways to give more flexibility and incentives to local schools to purchase locally grown fruits and vegetables right from their own community. I support a robust crop insurance program. But as implemented, the current crop insurance programs are not really feasible for diversified farms like ours. The requirements for yield history and cost justification just don't align with the realities of a small farm growing specialty crops. But as I've already alluded, insurance is just one form of risk mitigation. The diversification in production that we do at Mud Creek Farm, that's our greatest risk mitigation technique. So as the committee considers risk mitigation, I would encourage you to think beyond the scope of just insurance. The scope of solutions needs to include programs that enable capital deployment to accomplish diversification. The EQIP grant program, for example, it can be leveraged to accomplish not only conservation goals, but also diversification of farm activities. Capital resources that enable investments that diversify a farm's operations would help farms like ours to increase production without risk of loss. Again, thank you for the opportunity today to represent our farm and farms like us. I'm going to look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Now, Mr. Wingard, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Fetterman, Ranking Member Braun, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Charles Wingard. I'm Vice President of Field Operations at W.P. Rawl in Pillion, South Carolina. This is my family's fresh vegetable operation, and we specialize in southern leafy greens, green onions and leeks, leafy herbs such as cilantro and parsley, and sweet corn. We are based in South Carolina. We have a market footprint of about 30 states, and we have field operations in Florida, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. I'm here speaking on behalf of myself and International Fresh Produce Association. Thank you for your support of specialty crops title in the Farm Bill. Our industry represents 44% of the total U.S. farm crop income. However, our support in the current Farm Bill is only $2.1 billion, or in another way of putting it, is 3.5% of the total crop expenditures in the Farm Bill. The USDA says we should make half of our plate fruits and vegetables. The Farm Bill is woefully short in that. This committee and subcommittee showed great leadership 15 years ago when this title was introduced. It was developed to support the industry much more so than any direct payments to producers. This ensures that the American consumer is the ultimate beneficiary of good public policy. And to date, by nearly all accounts, this title has been very successful due to Senator Stabenow and Senator Roberts' leadership in buying into this vision 15, 18 years ago. That was a great step forward then, but there's more that needs to be done now. First, we oppose any attempt to change the definition of specialty crops as outlined in the Specialty Crop Competitiveness Act of 2004. This definition includes fruits, vegetables, tree nuts, dried fruit, and nursery crops. Maintaining this definition is essential for consistency and to ensure that the unique needs of specialty crops are addressed. Second, as you well know, a large portion of the U.S. population is overweight and exhibit poor dietary habits. I encourage you to find ways to make fresh fruit and vegetables more available to SNAP recipients and to expand the fresh fruit and vegetable snack program offered to school children that need it the most. Third, I encourage you to expand the specialty crop block grant program to at least $100 million annually. This program has been very effective at delivering research funding to the areas that need it the most by the people who know it the best. The Specialty Crop Research Initiative is another very successful program for our industry. A great example is the Eastern Broccoli Research Project. It was led by Cornell University, and the goal was to develop a broccoli variety that was suitable to the eastern U.S. climate. It was deemed necessary due to climate change in the southwest U.S. and consumers' demands to buy fresh fruits and vegetables with less food miles. Both of these reasons are important to help mitigate climate change. Initial collaborators included researchers in Maine, New York, Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, Virginia, Tennessee, Oregon, along with the USDA, and 4 seed companies and 7 fresh vegetable operations, and I'm proud to say that I was one of the 7. The investment is about $10 million, and today a new variety with great promise is being released for commercial producers to trial in their operations. This promises to be a huge return on investment for the U.S. taxpayer. Currently, there are 26 specialty crop research initiatives underway at 14 land-grant universities. Another good example of good government by utilizing the existing infrastructure and supporting those researchers that know the issues well. For example, Michigan State is leading multi-state research and extension efforts to develop modern pollination decision-making tools for blueberry growers. Penn State is still working to slow the spread of the spotted lanternfly and to educate the public in that region about the detection of the lanternfly, looking for control measures, and looking for natural predators. Back home, Clemson and NC State are developing tools to assist growers with identifying, preventing, and managing the guava root knot nematode, a new invasive species to us. Very few, if any, of these 26 initiatives would have begun without public support through the specialty crops research initiatives. These issues are simply too small to attract any private research funding. On a personal note, I produce about 700 acres of green onions on sandy soils, and there is only one herbicide labeled for use at planting, and it is being deregistered as we speak. My operation has invested in fixed assets to increase production while losing the only tool for pre-emergence weed control that we have. I know that there are options that appear to be viable without compromising consumer safety, but none are labeled. Green onion production today is dominated by Mexican suppliers, against whom we have a tremendous freight advantage on the East Coast. However, if this ongoing dispute between the EPA and the herbicide manufacturer continues, then more of our nation's green onion supply will be pushed offshore. And this is an example of how we need Title X to have the tools to be able to expedite research and decisions. In other words, we need to cut through the red tape. In closing, I want to thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts and these recommendations that are crucial to the growth, sustainability, and competitiveness of the specialty crop industry and of my operation. I ask that you consider these priorities and allocate the necessary resources to support the diverse needs of our sector so that U.S. growers can prosper and share that health and prosperity with American consumers and the economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wingard. Dr. Worthington, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning. Chairman Fetterman, Ranking Member Braun, Ranking Member Bozeman, and members of the subcommittee. I'm Dr. Margaret Worthington. I'm an Associate Professor of Horticulture and Director of the Fruit Breeding Program at the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture. Today I'm speaking on behalf of the American Seed Trade Association. The U.S. has a long history and tradition of entrepreneurship, founded on successful systems of technology transfer from the public sector to the private sector. Public-private partnerships are essential in deploying the strengths of both sectors to develop better improved varieties and bring them to the marketplace. This is especially true for low acreage, high-value specialty crops. Universities and companies are both using gene editing tools in research projects across plant species for a range of needing applications benefiting farmers, consumers, and the environment. These include disease resistance, drought tolerance, nutritional benefits, better taste, and food safety. Importantly, this research includes critical applications in small acreage, high-value specialty crops. These crops face unique challenges, and in the past, they haven't been able to take advantage and benefit from modern breeding tools due to high costs and associated regulatory burdens. Many countries have recently put forth policies that exempt or exclude products produced through gene editing from additional regulations, with clear and efficient implementation of these policies. However, differences in key elements of these policies means that the overall utility for plant breeding innovation varies greatly across the world. For example, EPA's recent final rule on plant-incorporated protectants, which was published just less than 2 weeks ago, is causing a great deal of concern in the plant breeding community. EPA's updated policy is intended to address new and evolving breeding methods like gene editing. The goal is to establish new derived from sexually compatible plant-based exemptions for certain plant-incorporated protectants that are introduced using tools like gene editing and result in plant characteristics that have already been created using conventional breeding. However, contrary to the EPA's approach to similar products used developed using conventional breeding, the rule adds bureaucratic layers of red tape for products developed using gene editing. This is true even though the agency views those products as having no additional safety risk compared to those used with conventional breeding. At the domestic level, the EPA rule runs counter to interagency alignment under the U.S. coordinated framework. The rule is at odds with regulatory streamlining enabled and envisioned under USDA's recent revisions to Part 340 regulations. Internationally, the rule is out of step with a growing list of international regulatory authorities that have used science-based rationale to streamline their policies and support commercialization of innovative products. Instead of being a leader in innovation, the U.S. is now at risk of losing out. Our farmers could lag behind in access to latest improved varieties compared to their counterparts in the rest of the world. These added and unnecessary regulatory burdens will increase the cost and time of getting new improved varieties into the hands of our farmers. Especially, I want to highlight many public sector breeders and small and medium-sized enterprises, and especially those working in those small acreage specialty crops, will not be able to afford the additional cost. All of this is going to force additional consolidation in the industry. Investment in future innovation, especially in gene editing, will be limited to a handful of very high acreage crops and a handful of large companies. Now, seed innovation is of course not limited to plant breeding. Modern tools like biostimulants also offer tremendous promise to help mitigate and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, conserve and replenish soil health, and improve water quality. So to fully realize their value, it's important that the Farm Bill sets a clear federal definition, as is called for in the Plant Biostimulant Act, which was recently introduced in the Senate and the House. So special thanks to Senator Braun for leading and to Senator Grassley for co-sponsoring that key legislation. Finally, when it comes to research, strong investments from discovery through development lead to better varieties. And this means better outcomes, both short and long term, for farmers, consumers, and the environment. Robust Farm Bill funding for primary USDA research is essential and desperately needed to continue supporting the work of programs like the National Plant Germplasm System, the National Clean Plant Network, and the Specialty Crops Research Initiative. Thanks again for the opportunity to provide testimony on behalf of the seed industry and the plant breeding community. We look forward to serving as a resource in important discussions related to the Farm Bill as they continue, and breeding and seed innovation in general. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Dr. Worthington. Ms. Kobus, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Subcommittee Chair Senator Fetterman, for the invitation, Ranking Member Senator Braun, distinguished committee members, and the staff who make this time possible. It's an honor to report to you today on how the Farm Bill can better serve organic specialty crop producers, especially through the certification process. I'm proud to represent Pennsylvania, a state that enjoys support for organic from the highest levels, is third in the nation in organic sales, and is the only state with our own Farm Bill. It is my deepest hope that this is the beginning of many conversations we will have about organic farming and the good these farmers are bringing to all of us. This dedicated group of specialty crop farmers and operations and the research and infrastructure communities that serve them bear a great regulatory burden for voluntarily choosing to utilize ecologically sound practices, but their work serves as a lesson for all of us. They function with and as part of nature. It is not an overstatement to say that their work is one of few things we can depend on to ensure the health and future of humanity, as we all continue to experience the increasing effects of excessive extraction from nature for the economic benefits of a few. These farmers note that fundamentally, you cannot have unlimited growth in a system with finite resources without creating harm. Day in and day out, they do the hard work it takes to have a food supply that supports healthy people, a healthy business, and a healthy community. To invest in their work and the cost of organic certification is to invest in all of our futures. They provide the solid foundation of a resilient supply chain, economic regrowth in support of community well-being, and services that can ease the many cost burdens of healthcare, energy, and environmental remediation. We get their feedback every day, and they need more support. The Farm Bill can better serve these organic producers through additional funding and making current programs permanently funded. A crucial step is to unify and streamline programs to help producers find, understand, and follow through with accessing them without redundant paperwork requirements. Requests for additional program support fall into 3 categories. 1, health benefits. Organic practices bring many health benefits, which are further detailed in the written testimony, but achieving them requires transition incentives for small farm certification, including direct payments to farmers, more funding for the National Organic Program to work with certifiers, making the certification process more uniform, and including automatic access to programs for farmers. More funding for research that will encourage land-grant universities to take on this work and compete with funding from chemical and pharmaceutical companies. Making funds for the top regional centers permanent and coordinating the Organic Transition Initiative efforts with the newly announced regional food centers, streamlining delivery of technical assistance, training, and market and workforce development. Economic benefits. The organic hotspot research from the Organic Trade Association and Penn State shows us that organic farming does not, as a rule, occur in wealthy communities, but it creates more wealth in communities. To support regrowth of these local strong communities, organic farmers need changes to crop insurance, equitable access to land for beginning and BIPOC farmers, and therefore production and distribution of food, new and better connected infrastructure, including organic processing and distribution facilities, and coordinated market development. 3, ecosystem services. Again, more details are given in the written testimony, but we need recognition and compensation for ecosystem services that these producers are providing, including automatic qualification of certified organic operations for any climate-smart benefits. We should also make every possible effort to fund and connect the work of Indigenous communities with our efforts, since theirs are the original climate-smart practices, and we have much to learn from them. In conclusion, the organic specialty crop community has an outsized regulatory burden for doing right by us all. They also have seemingly endless reserves of strength to accomplish the most sacred of tasks, figuring out how we can better nourish one another. Organic certification costs are only going to rise as the sector grows and the need for oversight increases with it. When we attempt to make organic food cheaper, we are approaching the problem from the wrong direction. We must recognize the true cost of healthy food production as well as the many externalized costs of conventional production practices and invest accordingly via the Farm Bill. Investing in organic research programs at the Agricultural Research Service and National Institute for Food and Agriculture will help farmers comply with organic regulations and thrive in the growing organic marketplace. This investment will result in healthier people, more resilient local economies, sustainable job creation, and stronger communities. I look forward to any opportunity to talk further with your offices on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you all now. We'll now be beginning our 5-minute rounds of questions for each member. And I'm going to begin and start for myself. And to everyone that I'm going to be asking the questions, please recognize that I only have 5 minutes and I'd like to get to 3 different questions. So here we go. Mr. Alonzo, as Pennsylvania's Lieutenant Governor, I became very familiar with the Commonwealth's robust mushroom industry. And because it's called the mushroom capital of the world, right? Yeah. It's remarkable when you realize that it's about 60% of the comes from right there in that part in Pennsylvania. And I know there's very specific kinds and particular challenges that you face. So, but we considered this year's Farm Bill and insurance for specialty crops. What would you like us to know about unique risks that are associated with mushroom production?
So we grow indoors, although most of the process starts outdoors. We have all of our byproducts. So the compost we make is great nutrition for the mushrooms, but that means other funguses, other pathogens want to get to that food as well. So we're unique in that we need some attention for that crop where we could have a huge disaster by being so specific in what we do. And we're unique to any other crop because mushrooms don't need sunlight. And that, along with, the fact that other pathogens really want to get in there.
Yeah, so, and I'm going to ask a question. It's kind of like a little off it, but I've been an advocate of psychedelics in terms of the magic mushrooms for PSTDs and for veterans especially. And I always thought what it could be, and maybe I'm wrong, an amazing economic kind of boom for the mushroom, whereas for the world producer now. And I think it could be a revolution in mental health is on that. Are you open to thinking of that, or is this something that would be like, no, I'm not anything?
We are absolutely open. We're entrepreneurs, but more importantly, we're trying to create healthy food for the community, for the U.S. And when we look at it, mushroom mycelium goes into products like furniture and oil, soaking up oil, and the nutrition side of mushrooms we got through research through USDA with the Mushroom Council. So anything that ties in health benefits, medical benefits, we're open to looking at. Obviously, you have to do it within parameters of being secure and safe and responsible, but we're open to it.
I think we should have more research and microdosing and other issues. I think is essential. But thank you for that. Moving over to Ms. Dioma Kobus. Certifying agents are leaders in implementing the USDA organic standards. And I know how crucial it is that standards are for certified organic producers. How can the USDA be more ensuring that the ingredient regulations are uniformly and consistently applied?
The USDA can take ownership of developing a program and certifying all organic inspectors under a standard such as ISO 17024, very similar to the program for food safety auditors and the need that arose in that industry. Organic is an industry that has really grown up now, and we need to professionalize some of these careers in order to maintain and grow the industry.
Thank you. And Dr. Worthington, I'm interested in your research as it relates to a specific issue in Pennsylvania, the spotted lanternfly. I relish stomping on them personally. They have a satisfying crunch when they go. But anecdotally, they seem like they really are really starting to spread even more and more in Pennsylvania. A couple years ago, I never would have seen one in Western Pennsylvania, and now I see them much more so for just a few years later. So, and I just, do you have any technologies that you discussed in your opening statement about protecting crops from this and other pests? Do you have any more advice, any kinds of thing about it?
Well, in Arkansas, have not had the opportunity to crunch a spotted lanternfly yet because we don't have them yet in our state. But I'm aware that they are a major problem, especially in the Northeast U.S., and they're growing in their range, and they affect a wide range of specialty crops, and many of which I work on, including grapes and peaches. So it's something I've got my eye on for sure. I think any approach to managing spotted lanternfly is going to be really interdisciplinary. I imagine you'll see proposals coming through the Specialty Crops Research Initiative to tackle this pest. I'm not aware of any specific disease it would be an insect resistance gene that could be deployed right now for resistance to spotted lanternfly. However, I think it's important to make it possible to create these technologies in a fast way. If we found it in a wild relative now, an insect resistance gene for spotted lanternfly, it could take us 20 to 80 years to get it into elite plant material, and it could be done much, much faster using precise tools like gene editing. So I encourage the committee to consider making science-based regulations that would enable us to tackle these problems quickly.
Thank you. Dodge, I recognize Senator Braun.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. By the way, I share your passion for mushrooms. I, along with maybe Senator Heinrich, maybe not the psychedelic type, but I pursue morels, chanterelles, oyster shelf mushrooms, hen of the woods, chicken of the woods, the variety of mushrooms that are out in the wild, amazing. Real quick question, has there been any attempt to cultivate them? Because I know they go for about $50 a pound.
We've tried to cultivate every single variety, and the ones you see in the grocery store are the ones we've been successful at, but that doesn't come from a lack of effort. So we have been able to do truffle, for example, but not in a way that we can actually stay in business. But we keep trying, and research will help.
Well, the amazing figure of how many pounds you can do per acre, and when I know what they go for in the marketplace,
We'd
man,
flood
that
the
sounds like
market.
it would be take farming to the next level. Question going to be for Dr. Carter or Dr. Worthington and Mr. Carter. I introduced the Plant Biostimulant Act with Senator, and it's bicameral and bipartisan as well. This bill would build on a USDA report from 2018 to help bring biostimulants to the marketplace. The products have several potential benefits, including increased tolerance of abiotic stress, decreased nutrient runoff, improved quality and yield. It just looks like a host of benefits. Mr. Carter, would you weigh in on how, as a specialty crop producer, they would benefit maybe you and others that are in your particular business?
Absolutely. And thank you for your work on that. Biostimulants, as you said, would have a large impact for specialty crop producers. I can think of one example. We grow a lot of sweet corn. It's a huge consumer of nitrogen. And the availability of nitrogen in the soil doesn't always translate to the amount that can be taken up because of the biome that's going on in the soil and some of the chemistry taking place there, which I'll let Dr. Worthington explain more because she probably is more qualified. But I know Mud Creek Farm is so named because we are bordered by Mud Creek, which is an important watershed in our community. So nitrogen runoff is something that we have to take very seriously. Similarly, specialty crop producers of tomatoes are continually seeing more and more impact of something called a blossom end rot, which has to do with calcium uptake. Increasing the soil biome is key. We handle that on our farm by we shovel a lot of stimulant out of the chicken barn, and that has increased the soil biome quite a bit. But I support the work for biostimulants as well.
Thank you, Dr. Worthington. About a minute. Weigh in on the scientific side.
Well, I don't work on plant biostimulants directly, but my understanding is they could be anything from microbial agents like mycorrhiza or bacteria, algal extracts, organic acids, amino acids, or purified molecules like chitin. And it's really important to regulate them and have a clear definition to be able to make sensible regulations. I know a lot of countries around the world have come up with clear definitions and have had new regulations passed that have enabled more research and development and commercialization of these products, making sure that they are effective and helpful for consumers.
Thank you. Mr. Carter, you've been at the leading edge of specialty crops and being an entrepreneur out of the gate. I think that's always an interesting combination. When you're so passionate about something, you parlay it into something where you can grow a business. You've been at it. You've talked to other farmers. What are the 3 or 4 issues? Because when we look at sustainability in agriculture and we talk about what you can do with mushrooms on 1 acre, it's many times less resource intensive, a lot more income per acre. What are the 3 or 4 issues you hear most that keep this niche from becoming larger and more impactful?
Thank you. One of the first ones that comes to mind has been regulatory hurdles for small producers to find market access. That's one thing I mentioned earlier in the work that we did in Indiana. And one of the things I'm engaged in quite a bit in Indiana, it happens to be interfacing between local health departments. The people that are responsible at the ground level of enforcing regulation often don't have the training, understanding, legal mindset that went into writing it. And so they overreach and they create more burden than even is in the code itself. Second is access to processing. So we lack a lot of value-added processing in Indiana on the meat side as well as on the produce side, which could create more market access. When we think about funding, we think about incentives, we should look at bringing processing back into some of the local communities.
Thank you.
Senator, this is now recognized Senator Booker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just have to jump in on the mushroom bandwagon here. Of all different types of mushrooms, I agree, but data on psychedelics is extraordinary in terms of helping our veterans with PTSD, the ongoing research done at Hopkins and Columbia. I think it's something that we as a nation need to start looking at, especially if we're trying to help a lot of folks who are coming home hurt and harmed. And I think it's a great specialty crop, perhaps, an opportunity. But I will jump off of that before my staff gets mad at me that I'm off script. Look, the title of the hearing is How the Farm Bill Works for Specialty Crop Producers. Unfortunately, it doesn't work well. It really doesn't. We are a nation, as you so rightly said, that our federal dietary requirements say 50% of our diet should be specialty crops, but less than 10% of the farm ag subsidies go to farmers who grow fruits and vegetables. It's a stunning reality. And if you're a small farmer growing specialty crops, the Farm Bill does even less to really help you. It's a stunning reality. In fact, 93% of small farmers don't get crop insurance. Only 7% take advantage of it. This is really stunning, especially when the majority of our farmers in America are small farmers. And what they do for local food systems, what they do for rural communities, the added benefits that our small family farmers in America are doing are incredible. But we are a government that has really established help and support for large commodity crops and making it very hard for the food that we eat as a country to be produced. And so really quickly, Ms. Kobus, as you know, many organic farmers operate these small acreage farms. Yesterday, I introduced a bill to establish an Office of Small Farms at USDA, which would directly serve small farmers with micro grants and technical assistance and would do a review of all USDA programs to make sure that they're accessible and beneficial to these small farmers. Can you explain really quickly the impact this type of USDA office would have for the farmers that you work with?
Absolutely. It would have huge impact. I support that idea 100%. It would give them a voice and get them a short way to reach help and reach assistance with the programs that are out there. A lot of the programs aren't being taken advantage of because when you run a small farm, farmers want to farm. They don't want to do paperwork, not to mention redundant paperwork. And so it would be huge in giving them the support they need to walk through what actually can help their farm and get it moving.
Yeah, the bureaucracy that a small farmer has to go through who is not equipped to do it is stunning. And one of the things when I visited with farmers, organic farmers around New Jersey, I just did not know the whole crop insurance system is not built for small farmers. They get, the people who do this get commissions that are based on the size of the insurance policy premium. It's a kind of a warped, in my opinion, incentive. These incentives focus agents on writing policies for the big farms and disincentivize them from helping the majority of the farmers in America who are small farmers. And so I believe this Farm Bill, we need to change this structure so crop insurance agents' commissions are based on the complexity of the policy, not the policy size, which would incentivize the agents to write a lot more crop insurance policies for small specialty crops. And so would this type of change be beneficial to the organic farmers that you work with?
Yes, absolutely. Additionally, technical assistance to educate those insurance agents would be additionally helpful. And data collection about the value of these specialty crops. If we could get the land grant institutions doing and compiling research on the value, it would definitely help with the crop insurance issue.
I really appreciate it. And then just lastly, Mr. Carter, you state in your testimony that USDA should use its purchasing power within the fresh fruits and vegetable programs to buy locally grown fruits and vegetables. We have incredible power within the federal government, but we're not using it to help to sustain, again, the food that American eats, not the ones that we put into the larger global commodities market or put into feed. This is folks who are growing the foods that are keeping America healthy at a time that, again, Mr. Wingard, you pointed out, we are a nation that is exploding in diet-related diseases caused by this hyper-processed foods. And it's stunning to me the cost taxpayers are paying right now. About 1 out of every $3 that our federal government spends is being spent on health care. The overwhelming majority of that is for preventable diet-related diseases. And so can you just talk about the impact it would have on local food systems, on local communities, on rural communities, on farms like yours, if the USDA substantially scaled up local procurement?
Yeah, thank you. It would be, like I said, the schools are embedded in the communities where the food is grown. And like I had mentioned, it's highly seasonal. We could scale up our production if we knew that there was an access to sell surplus, right? So I would put substantially more tomatoes and cucumbers and the like. If I knew that as I had surplus, as I had more supply than my own small retail stand could move, that there was an institutional buyer ready and incentivized to take that crop.
And Mr. Wingard, lastly, and I know I said two lastlies, but the programs like SNAP you mentioned, I've seen the incredible success of the GusNIP program, for example, drawing people towards local farming systems. It's an incredible purchasing power that we're using. Unfortunately, what I see often SNAP dollars used for without those incentives is the very foods that often lead us to explosions of diabetes, explosions of diet-related diseases. So is that a way, by trying to do incentives within already existing programs like GusNIP, to get more of that governmental purchasing power towards supporting those who produce healthy foods?
Yes, sir, and you got to realize people that are on SNAP are the people who need it, and they don't have a lot of purchasing power when they go into the grocery store. Our crops, a lot of times, are the more expensive crop or the more expensive products in the store. So they're going to feed more mouths with less money by buying those items than buying our items. So any kind of way we can get those SNAP recipients incentivized to buy fresh fruits and vegetables will be good, because it will start that transition in their lives to a healthier diet, to a healthier lifestyle, and less medical costs down the road. The fresh fruit and vegetable snack program is a great example of this.
Mr. Wingard, you are a kind, gentle man. I'm going to be your anger translator here for a second. It's not only the free market that's making organic foods more expensive. When my kids walk into a bodega, they're paying less for a Twinkie product than an apple because we subsidize everything in the Twinkie and not the fresh fruits or vegetables. So it's not like you're working in a free market. You're working in a market that's stacked against the commodities and the crops you're growing. I will be your anger translator anytime you want, sir.
Based on what you just said, and I've heard the argument a while back, we have subsidized obesity.
Yes, we have. And not just obesity, we pay twice. We subsidize the things that make us obese, and then we subsidize the Medicaid and Medicare that treats everybody. We're a government that is digging a deeper and deeper hole that's not only racking up costs. If you look at Medicaid and Medicare costs over the 20 years projected, we won't be able to afford anything in government. So we're not only digging a deeper and deeper hole, but we're also adding to sickness and misery in our society. It's ridiculous. All right. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Quite easy, Senator Booker. And now I'm pleased to introduce our chairwoman, and Senator Stabenow. All right.
Well, thank you. I don't know if Senator Bozeman was up next. I don't want to, Senator Bozeman, were you up next if you wanted to?
Yeah.
Well, it's. I'm learning a lot about mushrooms and silver. Oh, good. This is good. We grow those too. We have and I apologize for coming in late. Thank you.
Who should go next?
Yes, thank you. And I just actually came from the Senate Budget Committee that was also focused on agriculture and the costs of the climate crisis. And we had really great farmers there testifying about crop insurance, the importance of crop insurance, and the importance of conservation and the efforts that they feel are helping them mitigate the risk. It was a very interesting panel. But I want to thank you and Senator Braun for holding this meeting. We are an incredibly diverse state in Michigan in terms of agriculturally. We are second only to California in the number of different kinds of crops that we grow. And even though dairy's number one, the bulk of what we do is specialty crops. And so I appreciate all of your apples and asparagus and blueberries and our world-famous tart cherries. You name it, farmers in Michigan grow it. So supporting specialty crop growers has been a priority of mine since, frankly, I was in the U.S. House working on the Agriculture Committee, and then was able to get the first ever horticulture title to the 2008 Farm Bill. And Mr. Chairman, at the time they said, you don't add new titles to the Farm Bill. That's not possible. And so because of an awful lot of hard work of a lot of people, we defied the odds, and we now have a title for specialty crops, which are almost half the cash receipts from the country, and so important, as Senator Booker was talking about, in multiple ways, and certainly starting with our health and well-being. So 15 years later, here we are, continuing the benefits and more that we can do together for sure. Mr. Weingart, I wanted to start with you. First of all, I understand that you are now operating in Michigan, so good choice before coming before the committee. This is very good. So welcome to Michigan. And I wondered if you could speak more. You know, one of the things that we did when we put the horticulture title in place was to look with all the diversity of specialty crops, rather than our row crops and so on, and the way we were handling support for them. We set up the specialty crop block grant program. And all these years later, the program has invested about $1 billion in specialty crops. We certainly have seen this in Michigan, the different grower groups that have been applying. But how have these sustained investments from Congress directly benefited specialty crop growers in your mind? And welcome any other thoughts on what else we should be doing.
Well, I'm very familiar with the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program, and I do love Michigan. This is I'm gonna harvest in 1 week, my first harvest in Michigan.
Wonderful.
I'm in the Athens area, and it's been a very pleasant experience thus far. Everything looks really good up there. It looks so good, I'm scared of what's coming around the corner. But I'm very familiar with the Special Crop Block Grant Program. It's used in all states, South Carolina for sure. And what it does, and I've got some examples here. We had a leaf blight on mustard and turnip greens about 15, 20 years ago, and a lot of funding came through Special Crop Block Grant Program to work on new varieties for that. Clemson was the only public university to work on that, and along with USDA, a tremendous collaboration between those two organizations. And now we have 2 varieties of turnip greens. They started with 1,000 different species of mustard and turnip greens collected from around the world. They came to my farm and planted 750 of them, maybe 10-foot long rows on about 2 acres. It looked like a bunch of weeds to me. But they found 1 species out of 1,000 that had resistance. And through traditional breeding methods, it took them about 15 years, 12, 15 years to get that resistance into a turnip green and a mustard green that had desirable qualities for the market. So now we have 2 now, Charleston Southern and Carolina Southern, I think. So a lot of that funding came through Specialty Block Grant Program, but the overarching theme there is what that block grant program does is it sends the money from Washington to state capitals and then lets the state capitals divvy up the money to the research where it needs to go, because the people in the State Departments of Agriculture know what the needs are. They're much closer to the problems, much closer to the researchers, and the money's better spent doing it that way than trying to be directed out of Washington to go here, there, and yonder.
Thank you very much. I agree. Mr. Carter, I want to talk a little bit about local food systems. Very strong supporter of local food systems. Your startup, Market Wagons, working in communities like Detroit and Grand Rapids to connect Michiganders to local vendors. I'm very excited about that, including many who are selling, of course, fresh fruits and vegetables. The COVID-19 pandemic really shook the ag supply chains, as we all know. How did the pandemic affect demand for locally produced foods across your network? And how do thriving local markets like those in Grand Rapids and Detroit help expand business opportunities for small and diversified farmers?
Thank you, Senator. Yeah, you're right. The pandemic had a big impact on our operation. mainly because we are e-commerce with delivery. So obviously everybody needed to stay home, take delivery of food. So there was a large spike on the demand side of that marketplace. On the supply side, which is what we're here to talk about, the producers, suddenly their restaurants that they sell to, farmers markets, most of the markets that small producers can sell in were shut down. The resilience of small diversified farms is that they are agile. So they were able to immediately, and by immediately I mean in a matter of a week, divert inventory, divert production from what was going into food service and to farmers markets or other retail to Market Wagon. We grew 600% in 4 weeks. It's a matter of scale that can almost break a company. And it's only because we were able to match the supply with the demand as that was growing. Growing broader just in terms of what a marketplace like this and local foods mean. The average age of a farmer is going up by a year almost every year. So if you're a statistician, that's not good for new people coming into the industry. And I represent I'm a fourth generation farmer, and I would have left the farm. I would have been a part of that statistic. I was 18. There was no future in the small farm at that time. What we're seeing now through creating market access, Market Wagon and other similar enterprises, is the ability for someone in my generation or younger to say, well, Dad's got 2,000 acres of corn and soy or whatever large-scale ag, and there's not enough income there for me to join that enterprise, but I can take these 3 over here and I can make specialty crops and make a living on it. And that's amazing. We're seeing first-generation farmers, we're seeing next-generation farmers, and we're bringing people into this industry, creating jobs, creating entrepreneurship, and I'm really excited about that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to underscore what you just said, because when we think of markets in the Agriculture Committee, traditionally over the years, we've thought of trade, and certainly we feed the world, American farmers, and trade's really important. But there are more markets now that we're talking about, and we have farmers, a lot of younger farmers, that are making a good living out of local and regional markets right here. So it's exciting because we've got more opportunity to have money go back to rural towns and be able to strengthen rural communities by having different kinds of markets, which I think it bodes well. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. The chair now recognizes Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Being a former college football coach, I learned a lot in these hearings. Mushrooms, spotted lanternflies, but hey, turnip greens are right up my alley, Mr. Wingard, so thanks for bringing, and collards, you didn't bring that up, and I'm kind of disappointed, but that's all right. In Alabama, my home state, we have 3,500 specialty crop farms and 60,000 acres, and growing, and hope we continue to grow, Mr. Carter. My concern is we're losing our generations of farmers. We're selling out because we can't make any money. Some can, some can't, but I think specialty crops are going to be a boom for us. And we talked about the SNAP program and farmers markets and all those things where people can actually make money with what they do. And in this farm bill, we got to prioritize what we're doing, safeguards for the small farmer, not just the big farmer. And we got to have competitive markets. Mr. Wingard, I want to ask you about this. In Alabama, we have 200 farms that utilize H-2A programs, temporary and seasonal workers. And if we didn't have that, they couldn't survive, okay? And now we've started this adverse effect wage rate program that determines wages for the H-2A. And we're going up, 14% this year, and I think it's going to cost us $8 to $10 million, our farmers. Give me your thoughts on that.
Okay, well, first of all, it's going to cost you more than $8 or $10 million.
I'm just talking about for our state.
I'm talking about for your state, too. It would be
really?
a higher cost than that.
Don't hurt my feelings now.
Well, you should know, first of
My
all,
farmers are listening to this, by the way. So
collards is my biggest crop. I didn't mention that. I'm a Tiger Letterman. My blood runs orange. I was on the football team at Clemson.
Oh, okay. Well,
But I was just a water boy.
Yeah. Well, you took everything from us at Auburn, the mascot and everything. But go ahead.
Yes, sir. But anyway, the H-2A is a serious concern to us. It is it's literally an obstacle and one of the regulatory burdens you've heard about here today. Our H-2A wage rate in South Carolina is right at $15 an hour. We had the 14% pay raise too. In Pennsylvania, I think it's $17. In Michigan is $17, $18. We don't know as producers how it's set. We don't know what it is till about the 10th, maybe the 5th or 10th of December, and it goes into effect January 1st. And if we bring workers in on November 1st for 10 months, and we sign a contract, everybody agrees to the contract, then on January 1st, the wage goes up. So the contract really doesn't apply to the wages. It is it's becoming a disincentive for farmers to try to do it the right way as it speaks to labor. My business model, in my business, labor is about 35% of our total expenses. So that 15% wage rate we took in December, 5% fell straight to the bottom line. And when you have long-term contracts, such as larger growers do, buyers don't really care about what our wages did or what our costs did. We agreed to the contract, and you know, they expect us to deliver at that price. So now we have to cut costs somewhere else.
What's the answer?
The answer is fixing the labor program, fixing the H-2A, having some serious reforms in the H-2A program.
Anybody else got a thought on that? H-2A? Anybody? Nobody? All right, thank you very much. Mr. Carter, the adjusted gross income and other forms of means testing disproportionately impact specialty crop producers from participating in certain USDA disaster programs, you know, like the non-insured crop disaster assistance, tree assistant program. However, the emergency relief program does not have a cap on AGI, allowing specialty crop producers opportunities for large payments to compensate for their losses. What's your thoughts on instituting a waiver of the AGI means for tests for the NAP and the TAP disaster programs, which operations derive at least 75% of their income from farming and forestry? What impact would that have on family farms and specialty crop growers?
Generally, I think that having the AGI limits on any of these benefits seems counterproductive. I'm not personally knowledgeable. I don't have any direct experience in that situation, but it seems that taking the most profitable, which typically in a free market enterprise means the most successful and the best at what they do, and telling them that they're not eligible to have risk mitigation doesn't stand to reason to me.
Anybody want to comment? Anybody else?
I agree with your thoughts, and I think that the AGI means testing is punishing those who did the best, those who took the risk, grew, reinvested in their company. I think the AGI means testing punishes them.
I got one more question. Mr. Weingard or Mr. Carter or anybody, you know, our southeast fruit and vegetable growers are impacted by cheap imports from countries that do not adhere to our nation's environmental and labor laws. Neither the USMCA or the International Trade Commission has resolved these issues. Growers continue to see Mexican and South American imports hit grocery stores at the same time as U.S. harvest, decreasing the price our farmers receive for their products. Should this be addressed in the Farm Bill, and any recommendations? Anybody?
So, Coach, the domestic producers, U.S. domestic producers, have high cost to produce our food because of regulations and high standards, and those costs, we invest in our people, our process, and our facilities in order to achieve those standards and to meet the regulations. If the Farm Bill wants to address that, and I think that's fine to do, then we need tools like market development. We need money for research and technology. We need access to better crop enhancement materials so we can spend $25 an acre on weed control with an effective herbicide instead of $225 or $325 an acre using hand pulling. We call that pull it. Mm-hmm. We need access to robotics. We need research on robotics, robotic weed control, robotic weeders, robotic transplanters, which is what we're looking at. And we need varieties that are improved varieties that have better disease resistant, drought resistant, pest resistance. And other ways that can help us offset the cost of our production.
Basically, you need the tools to be able to compete.
We need more tools in the toolbox, yes, sir.
Yeah.
More plays in the playbook.
The organic demand right now in the United States far exceeds the supply we're able to put into it domestically. So we would love to get those farmers a higher premium for the crops that they're growing by transitioning them to organic. And that could be a huge boost to those local communities, and it's a sustainable way to build those communities. The demand is definitely there.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The chair now recognizes Senator Boozman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're not used to witnesses and senators trash talking each other during the hearing. So, Dr. Worthing, thank you for your testimony and thank you for the work that you're doing on agriculture biotechnology. Regulatory certainty is of paramount importance. For decades now, the federal government at large has attempted to harmonize and modernize its biotechnology approval process, which would pull this regulatory system into the 21st century and provide the transparency and predictability developers, farmers, and consumers need. These principles are also key to American innovation, to U.S. agricultural production, and to addressing global environmental challenges. The list goes on and on. The Department of Agriculture made great progress in this endeavor and should be commended. Unfortunately, last week the EPA released a final rule on plant-incorporated protectants, commonly known to as PIPs, that does the opposite. This rule will frustrate U.S. innovation, drive companies to export their staff, investments in technologies to our international competitors, and create market barriers that only the largest multinational corporations can overcome. In short, EPA's PIP rule puts American farmers and consumers last. More significant, it removes another tool from the toolbox that specialty crop producers, all producers, so desperately need. Dr. Worthington, you work in the field every day. What impact will EPA's rule have on U.S. agriculture and U.S. innovation?
Yeah, I think it's going to disincentivize innovation, and I think it's going to have a disproportionate impact on specialty crops and on small and medium-sized enterprises and public sector investment. You know, there's been so much investment through Farm Bill-sponsored programs in research, in plant breeding. You know, we find all these disease resistance genes, we do all this work, and what this is going to do is make it more difficult to commercialize those products. So I think that ultimately you're going to see more consolidation in the industry with this regulation, and the innovation will be on a few large crops by a few small companies, or a few very large companies, like you have seen with older transgenic technologies, despite the fact that we're dealing with a very, very different technology here with things, you know, traits, genes that are from sexually compatible species that have already been produced using conventional plant breeding. So I would just advocate for a more product rather than process-based regulatory framework. And, you know, I want to highlight that the new EPA rule is a setback for interagency alignment. It is in direct conflict with the USDA's recent revisions to its Part 340 regulations. And it's also out of step with a lot of other countries, including our number one seed trading partner, Canada, which has a very progressive science-based policy on regulation of these plant-incorporated protectants that, you know, are existing within sexually compatible species.
Good. Thank you very much. It's interesting, Madam Chair, one of the things that we've discussed at length, because it's come up through these subcommittee hearings as we talk to producers, and again, both of us are out and about the country doing listening sessions, is the amount of paperwork that you have to endure. And it impacts specialty crops much more than the other commodities, in the sense they're used to doing it. You know, they've just kind of grown up in this. The other problem is that for conservation programs and things like that, it's easier to get a larger grant than it is a small grant, you know, where the small grant can make every bit as much difference, you know, in what you're trying to achieve. So the way you can help us is put that at the top of your list. It's interesting, several of the witnesses talked about that already, brought that forward. But that's something, this is something that's not going to cost money. This is going to save money. It's going to make you so much more productive. It will level the playing field, okay? But there's no, there's just no, if you have a decent education, you ought to be able to fill the form out, and then the other problem that we've got is not getting it done in a timely fashion. That's the other problem, is having to wait on these things. So thank you for mentioning it, and let's really be unified in that. That's something that I just don't think there's any excuse for. Those are things that we can fix. But we appreciate your testimony, and we're going to work really hard to see how we can be helpful in the next Farm Bill. And like I say, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for holding the hearing.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Senator Warnock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you all might be aware that Georgia is known as the peach state, but climate change is threatening to put our state fruit at serious risk. This year, Georgia experienced a very mild winter, and then we got a late freeze. And this combination, kind of a 1-2 punch, wreaked havoc on our peaches. And experts from the University of Georgia estimate that 90% of Georgia's peach crop failed, 90%. Mr. Wingard, I know that South Carolina and some of the other southeastern states where you work grow a lot of peaches and other specialty crops similar to Georgia. Can you describe how the changing climate has affected production in the southeastern United States?
Thank you, Senator. I don't do any peaches. I'm a leafy greens guy, but I'll tell you what I know, and it's not much. They are struggling with climate change, or they're struggling with different patterns of weather, and we too have seen a significant decrease in peaches. I think our number's in the 60-70% decrease or loss. I think that can be addressed a little bit through some research. It's a long process to fix, because peaches are about 3 or 4 years before you ever, peach trees are about 3 or 4 years old before you ever pick a peach. But there is a lot of research going on peaches. Dr. Worthington and I were discussing it before the hearing, and I think peaches and other crops that are affected by climate change can be bred to adapt to a new climate. I spoke earlier in my oral comments about the East Coast Broccoli Initiative, and that's essentially what that was about, is to get broccoli varieties bred that are adapted to the climate in the eastern U.S. as opposed to the southwestern U.S. I think research is the answer to that.
And we will only see continued climate change. That's not going away, sadly. And it will continue to cause uncertainty for growers, so research is important. But also, as we get the research, we've got to be nimble in our policy approach, because the research isn't going to help us much if we're not able to apply it to our practices. So in 2021, Georgia produced 130 million pounds of peaches valued at $85 million. So when these crops fail at this large of a scale, it affects the producer. But we need to remember that the local economy also takes a hit. And so as we reauthorize the Farm Bill, do you or anyone else on the panel would like to speak to this, do you agree that our crop insurance programs need to be updated to better reflect the realities of climate change and avoid ad hoc disaster programs?
Yes. I think it's really important to recognize that if we're not talking about the root causes of climate change, and industrial agriculture being second as a root cause of climate change, we're doing a disservice to the discussion here today. So, technology is going to help us continue to adapt, but we can only adapt so far. There's a thin layer of the atmosphere and a thin layer of the soil that provides life to us humans on the planet. And we really need to engage in the practices to mitigate the effects of industrial agriculture and really transform the food system for all of our benefit.
So we need to give our growers the tools in order to manage the actual risks that they're facing, which has implications not only for them, but for our economy. When I meet with Georgia growers, one of the issues they consistently bring up are the lack of options they have for managing risk. And one program they've come to rely on is the Tree Assistance Program, or TAP. TAP allows producers to replant bushes, trees, or vines that produce an annual crop loss due to natural disasters. Currently, the program does not allow producers to replace their damaged plants with improved varieties that are more resilient to disease or environmental changes and may even provide higher yields. Mr. Wingard, can you describe the challenges that this creates for producers, and is this something you think we should address in the Farm Bill or anyone on the panel?
Well, I'm not a peach farmer, and I don't do any trees, but I do think it makes sense that if you have trees or vines or bushes that are damaged and you have more suitable or improved varieties to replace them with, yes, it makes sense to replace them, and it makes sense
not to be
help.
forced to replant the trees that you know are not going to work. Right?
That's correct, and you should do it before. You should do it. In my opinion, you should do a little bit along the way, so you don't have to wait and do a large part of it at one time.
Okay. Thank you. I'm out of time, but I look forward to exploring ways we can make these kinds of technical changes in the Farm Bill that will improve the prospects of growers and our economy. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
The chair now recognizes the distinguished gentleman from Vermont.
I thank the distinguished chairman from Pennsylvania. And I think our witnesses, we love this Agriculture Committee. We all want to do the best we can, and you are really being helpful, and I appreciate it. Just one observation. I kind of wonder why we use the term specialty crops when we're really talking about pretty healthy food, and healthy food is really important, so I just want to thank all of you for that. And Mr. Chairman, at some point, I think we might want to consider a new name for specialty, because this is tremendous. And one of the things that I think we're struggling with here on this committee is to actually put more of an emphasis on the nutritional benefits of this healthy food. In the Farm Bill in 2018, we authorized $61.5 billion for the commodity crops, and they're important. But when you compare that to $2 million for the horticultural crops, it would suggest that one element is getting pretty generous treatment and another element is being ignored, when in fact the contradiction is that all of these healthy foods are so good for us. So I'm for having a much greater emphasis on trying to get these programs more fully supported. And I'm going to I'll start with you, Dr. or Ms. Corbis. Just outline what the benefits of local, I'm going to continue using the term specialty crops, but I don't like it, okay? What do they provide to our communities?
Oh gosh, well, so many things in addition to, that local sustainable economy and the healthier food, less food miles, that food is traveling. The bigger a farm is, the more challenges we face. So to transition more small specialty crop growers to organic, there are definitely challenges in doing that. But on the other side, the health benefits, we know that it produces healthier food. We know it produces healthier soils. So.
Let me go on that point. One of the extraordinary contributions agriculture has to our communities is that the farmers are the custodians of the open landscape. One of the barriers to entry is it's so expensive. But my sense is that for younger farmers, for folks in underrepresented communities, these smaller farms are an access point of entry if we can find ways that they can get the research that should back them up, the markets that they need, and that they're local. So I introduced the Opportunities in Organic Act that would, among other things, increase the cost share payments for some of our underrepresented groups trying to get into farming. And I'll ask you again, given your experience with the organic certification process, what do you see as the greatest barriers of entry to our small and mid-sized agricultural producers to transition to organic?
Yeah, definitely access to land is a big one, and those initial costs of certifying land that hasn't yet been certified. There are big challenges in that 3-year period where you take an acre from conventional land to certified organic. So that act in particular, it builds on a lot of the Transition to Organic Partnership Program work that we are starting out here in the organic community, but it really fills in the holes for a lot of the practical challenges that farmers.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Dr. Worthington, too, to maybe comment on that. I don't want to ask you about this, but I want to follow up at some later time about your comment about the regulatory process in Canada versus the U.S. I came in at the tail end of that. But just the question I asked, Ms. Corbus, could you address that?
Well, I have had a little bit of experience with the organic industry. I was funded by the Organic Research and Extension Initiative for my PhD research that got me here today, I guess. But I think her comments are much better than mine about the barriers to entry for organic growers. I haven't worked in the certification sphere before.
All right. Okay, thank you. I see my time is up, but I want to thank each of you for doing such important work on behalf of agriculture and the specialty crops. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you, sincerely thank you for coming and doing all the traveling from a long distance to share your experiences and expertise today. I sincerely can say that I learned from you today. The input from experts like you at these hearings are crucial to the work that we do as we write the bill. And that we want to remind that this farm bill is really all about farmers, all farmers. We heard a lot today from witnesses the need to support specialty crop producers and certified organic produce. As the farm bill takes shape over the coming weeks and months, I will be working closely with colleagues on both sides of this office to do just that. And I also want to thank you again to our witnesses and my colleagues for being here. I look forward to making this bill work for all farmers, and you have really enriched the farm bill for coming today. The record will remain open for 5 business days, and now this hearing is now adjourned.